the time the war ended. And we're waiting for our turn to go home, and you went home by the number of points you get. And the more time, more months you spent in Europe, the more points you got. And I forgot now exactly, I needed 75, but we had to wait till the war brides got home first. They were shipping all the married guys, their wives home. And so I couldn't stay in that camp. There was thousands of us up there, camped in tents. So I went to the officers and I asked them, is there something that I could do without staying here? He said, what would you like to do? I said, well, how about driving? And he said, yeah, we have openings, you can drive for a colonel. And that's how I met Colonel Wiggins. Camp Lucky Strike in Le Havre. I was driving a 1939 LaSalle that was made in Belgium.
Were you offered to bring that car home?
Yes, for $500 I could have bought that car home, and I says, why should I bring a 1939 car home when I can buy a new when I get home?
And little did you know when you got home, there were no cars.
No cars. Yeah. Driving for Colonel Wiggins at that time. He was in charge of the Chandler Bay section, which is all the repo depots throughout, all through France and Belgium along the east coast there. He was in charge of all that. So we drove him down to the minefields, and there were about 5 or 10 Germans taking up mines. So I was standing there with the colonel, and I heard somebody in back of me say, I know that sergeant. He could speak a little English. And the colonel turned around and looked at me and says, you know that German? I said, yes, sir. We captured him in Marchy in Belgium. Marchy. Well, if you want to talk to him, it's okay. So I went over to Hans, and he was compounded in Le Havre area. And he wanted to do something for me. And he asked me if I had any coins. I said, well, the only coins I got are the ones I took from you. So he said, well, do you have anything bigger? I said, I'll have a silver dollar. So he took the silver dollar. And he made that silver dollar into a ring. And he put my initial on the top, and he also took a nail and he made roses around my initial. And inside the ring he had put Sergeant G. Hill, St. Lo, France, 1944. He put all that inside that ring. So that's how I got to know him.
That Hans Schmidt made a memory for you.
Yes. He did. He did a beautiful job. Glen, my son Glen has that ring now.
That's right, yes.
When he made the ring for me, I knew there was something he wanted me to do. And that was, he had received no mail for 3 years. And he had a wife and a young daughter at home. But he didn't know, they didn't know whether he had died during the war, and he didn't know whether they got killed during the bombings of the war. So he asked me, he called me on the side, and he asked me if there's any way possible that I could get to Frankfurt to see if his wife is still living with him. So I said, I don't know whether I can do that or not. So it must have been a good month or so later. I had the opportunity to get a Jeep. So I told Hans to write something to let her know that I'm the one that asked him for these information. So he wrote a little note on it that he's okay, this is Sergeant Hill, this is all in German, and he told me what was in there. So I went to the colonel and I said, Colonel, I've been asked a big favor by one of the prisoners. And of course he frowned, and then I says, you know, it's Hans Schmidt. I says, he hasn't seen his wife or heard from her in 3 years. And he asked me if I could get the, he says, Sergeant, I don't know anything about it. But if you're gone for 2 or 3 days, then I'll know where you're at. I said, well, I don't want to go if you have to be driven someplace. You have to go to Paris or whatever, you know. He says, no, you go ahead and do that. But I don't want to know nothing about it. I said, okay. So I took a Jeep and I went to Frankfurt, and I finally found the house where the apartment building where it wasn't a home, it was an apartment building. And so I knocked on the door, and the daughter came to the door, and she had lost part of her leg from the knee down. And they had like a broomstick kind of taped to her leg because they didn't have any medical stuff.
There are no medical supplies.
And so then his wife came down to the door, and and she says, oh, everything's in German, right? And she just motioned for me to follow her, so I did. And she started going up the steps. She started taking off her jacket, and I said, no. I says, I have a letter from Hans. Well, she turned around immediately and came down, and I gave her the note that Hans had written. And she was so happy. God, they were hugging. The daughter was hugging each other that their father was still alive, you know. And so I told the daughter she could speak very little English, so I had to be careful of the words I used. And I says, tell your mother to write something quick, because my Jeep is up in the alley, and if they find my EMPs, I said, I'm in big trouble. Because you don't have a key for a Jeep, it's a switch. You just turn the switch and it starts, you know. So she scribbled something down in German real quick, and then I left. I went back and gave it to Hans, and he gave me a big hug. He said, boy, I'm so happy, you know, to know that what he didn't realize that his daughter had lost her leg from the knee down, and she included that in the letter somehow.
Of course.
It was a short letter. It couldn't have been more than, I don't know, a couple paragraphs, because I didn't give her that much time, you know. So that's how what I did for Hans, and he made the ring for me, and I checked on his family for him. There were so many troops. There were 12 million troops in Europe when the war was over with. And to keep us out of trouble, they let us take tours any place on the continent that you wanted. So I chose Switzerland. And you couldn't take more than, I think it was $80. They allowed you to take $80 in. But they paid for everything else. And so I went to Wingen, Switzerland, and I learned to ski real quick, but not real good, but I could take the slopes in front of the hotel. I didn't take those trips down the mountainside because a lot of the guys were breaking their legs and everything else on the skis, not being. So, but I had a very good time there. I was there for a week, and all expenses were paid.
Wonderful.
And that $80 that I had, I bought my mother a watch. And I think you have that watch.
I do have that watch, yes.
These are my service medals that I received during the war.
Oh.
The stars represent the number of battles that were in. These pamphlets were shot into the German lines in 105 Hausers for them to surrender. It's a pass. It's a pass to surrender to the American troops in the Battle of the Bulge.
when you came back from the service, you went to Charleston first, I gather.
Yes.
You went to your family's. And then when did you get the opportunity to come up and see Mom
About
again?
about a month later.
Okay, took a train up, I gather?
Yeah, or maybe a couple of months, because there was no clothing.
Right.
We had you could wear your uniform for 6 months. They gave you could wear your uniform for 6 months. After that, if you got caught with a uniform on, then you got, fined or
whatever.
penalized or whatever. So to try to find civilian clothes was rough.
Really?
So I finally did. So it must have been maybe 3 or 4 months later that I came up to visit her.
Okay.
And then when I asked her to marry me, I didn't get an answer right away. So I said, well, why don't you come down and meet my mother and dad? So she did. She came down. I met her at the train station in Glen. And
That was it.
that's how we met. That's it. That's the story. I'm 85. I'm doing good.